he deliver on his cornerstone promises?
In just 100 days, President Trump has turned America around, and he's just getting started.
Tough questions ahead for White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus. And will Democrats try to block Trump's agenda or seek compromise? We'll ask House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi. Plus, USA! Battle at Berkeley. Is free speech on campus being silenced? Ann Coulter and Robert Reich, both here live. From ABC News, it's This Week. Here now, Chief White House Correspondent Jonathan Karl.
Good morning. Washington is a town obsessed with milestones, and all week it's been all about President Trump's first 100 days. But for all the hype around that, as it turned out, day 100 of Donald Trump's presidency looked and sounded a lot like day one. There was the president delivering a hard-edged America First speech, his tone and his message as dark and foreboding as his inaugural address.
If you try to illegally enter the United States, you will be caught, detained, deported, or put in prison, and it will happen.
And just as they did on day one, protesters filled the streets of the Capitol, this time demanding action on climate change. The 100-day marker has been an obsession of those in power and those writing about those in power since Napoleon's reign ended in Waterloo precisely 100 days after he returned as emperor. For American presidents, it's been a marker since FDR passed a blizzard of bills in his first 100 days in response to the Great Depression. But let's face it, President Trump is right when he calls 100 days a ridiculous standard to judge a presidency. Of course, he elevated that ridiculous standard as a candidate by raising expectations for his first 100 days in a campaign speech at Gettysburg, no less. The truth is, history will little note nor long remember any 100-day judgments made in the midst of all that is happening right now. 10 years before he was elected president, Abraham Lincoln eulogized another president, saying, quote, "The presidency, even to the most experienced politicians, is no bed of roses. No human being can fill that station and escape censure." But the true judgment on a president's accomplishments does not come in the midst of political battle. It is not found in the polls. The true assessment of a president comes in what Abraham Lincoln called the calm light of history. So, in this show, today, we won't waste time with 100-day report cards. We will look to the next 100 days, or maybe the next 1,360 days until the next presidential inauguration. We begin with the biggest challenge facing President Trump at this moment, North Korea, continuing to test missiles despite repeated warnings. Backstage in Harrisburg, ABC's Catherine Falders caught up with the president.
Military action.
And joining me now, White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus. Reince, thank you for joining us here.
Happy to be here, Jonathan.
So what did the president mean by that? Soon we'll find out. How is the U.S. going to respond to North Korea?
Well, first of all, the administration and the president and our country always seeks peace. And so, but the other piece of this is that the president is someone who's made it very clear that he's not going to telegraph his next moves. He's not going to put out the plan for North Korea in the New York Times or the Washington Post. He's working with General Mattis, he's working with Rex Tillerson, he's working with General McMaster and his team in making determinations of how to move forward in a pretty delicate, complicated matter.
The president had some interesting remarks about Kim Jong-un in his interview this week with Reuters. Is there any scenario where you could see Donald Trump engaging in direct talks with Kim Jong-un?
I'm not sure about that, Jonathan. I don't want to get ahead of him or the foreign policy team on that matter, but certainly we have a situation where lots of administrations before us and many others have just watched this transpire, watched North Korea build the capability it has today, watched them put missiles into mountainsides, and here we are today. And we've got a president that means business, and he's used his, I think, negotiating skills very wisely, befriending and becoming very close to President Xi in China, working with China to put pressure on North Korea, working with our allies. Yesterday I had a conversation with the president of the Philippines. Today he'll be talking to Singapore and Thailand. And he, as you know, he keeps in close contact with President Abe in Japan. This is a mission-driven president who spends a lot of time working with our allies and talking to his experts on how to handle the situation and do it wisely and do it the right way for the American people and actually the people around the world.
I want to ask you about that call with the president of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte. The White House put out an official readout of that call, praising Duterte for, quote, fighting very hard to rid his country of drugs. But this is a president of the Philippines that so many say has blood on his hands. Just take a look at what Human Rights Watch said last month. Since the inauguration of President Rodrigo Duterte on June 30th and his call for a war on drugs, Philippine national police officers and unidentified vigilantes have killed over 7,000 people. Duterte's outspoken endorsement of the campaign implicates him and other senior officials in possible incitement to violence, instigation of murder, and command responsibility for crimes against humanity. This is somebody who, by the way, also said of President Obama that he was the son of a whore. Why is President Trump honoring President Duterte now with a visit to the White House?
Well, look, I'm not so sure it's a matter of honoring this president or any of the facts that you've laid out there. It's really a matter of a potential for nuclear and massive destruction in Asia and the potential, at least according to North Korea, of developing an ICBM that could, at some point down the line, if we do nothing, potentially reach the United States. This is a different level of a problem that we need cooperation among our partners in Southeast Asia. And I think what the
Does that mean human rights don't matter now?
No, it doesn't.
Does that mean you're not?
Absolutely not. It doesn't mean that human rights don't matter. But what it does mean is that the issues facing us developing out of North Korea are so serious that we need cooperation at some level with as many partners in the area as we can get to make sure that we have our ducks in a row, so that if something does happen in North Korea, that we have everyone in line backing up a plan of action that may need to be put together by partners in the area.
Help me understand how the president sees this. When you're looking at the list of priorities, when you're dealing with a foreign power, a foreign country like the Philippines, where does human rights, promotion of democracy, all of those things that Reagan put center, George W. Bush put center, front and center in foreign policy, where does that stand in the list of priorities for President Trump?
Look, it stands very high at the top of the list. But when you have, wait a second, when you have North Korea and you have them flagrantly talking about developing nuclear warheads, which they've already done, and wanting to, and they're putting out videos of how they're going to launch these things to the United States and across the globe, that has to remain at the highest level. But when it comes to human rights, look what President Trump and his team did in Syria. I mean, that was a matter of human rights, and the president said enough was enough, and he wanted to make a statement to Assad and the rest of the world that there are some lines you don't cross. So the president's shown his willingness to stand up for human rights.
But let's go back to that official readout of this call with Duterte. It praises him for working very hard to rid his country of drugs. This is somebody with an abysmal human rights record who's been accused of basically mass extrajudicial killings. Did that not come up in the phone calls? And why is it not mentioned?
Well, I didn't sit through the entire call, Jonathan, but it is something that this president in the Philippines is claiming that he's working towards. Obviously, we want to encourage him to do better. But this call, the purpose of the call, is all about North Korea. The purpose of all of these calls, as you've seen on the schedule, I know you watch every little move that happens, and you should. That's your job. He's been speaking a lot to all of our partners in Southeast Asia. The issue on the table is North Korea, and there is nothing right now facing this country and facing the region that is a bigger threat than what's happening in North Korea. And if we don't have all of our folks together, whether they're good folks, bad folks, people that we wish would do better in their country, doesn't matter. We've got to be on the same page.
Okay, let's turn to domestic issues. You unveiled at least the outline of the president's tax plan, and you've heard critics say this is a giveaway to the rich. So I want to ask you, and I know you disagree with that, but are you open to a compromise that would actually raise the top rate, raise the rate on the very wealthiest in this country to save 40%? Is that something you'd be willing to do as a part of a final compromise?
I'm not going to get ahead of where we're at on the negotiation side, and obviously we've got to work with our leadership on the Hill and the House and the Senate. We've got to talk to people across the country that are affected by whatever tax reform plan is ultimately signed into law. But if you look at where this tax plan is going, while the top rate is lowered to 35%, there's also a lot of deductions that have been taken off the table. So a person like Donald Trump, or a person like some of our folks like Steve Mnuchin and others, they're not going to see much of a reduction in their taxes because a lot of the deductions
Well, the president could see a big
a lot of the deductions that they enjoy are taken away. And so, quite frankly, it's not a tax increase for people at the top. It's actually a massive tax deduction, and what the president cares most about is the middle class. This is a targeted tax deduction for the middle class. It's also targeted at attracting business in this country and making sure that businesses can pass on savings to their employees so people can put more money in their pocket, they can enjoy the American dream, put their kids through college, and retire like people used to do back when places I grew up in Kenosha, Wisconsin, where you could work 30 years at American Motors or Chrysler, and you could have a great life. That's the way things used to be. That's not the way things are in a lot of places anymore, and that's what President Trump cares about. The middle class, the American dream, that's what's in his heart.
So I remember quite well, many times over the course of the campaign, candidate Donald Trump, talking about how he was going to raise taxes on the hedge fund guys, as he called them. He said the hedge fund guys are getting away with murder. Now I want you to take a look at the way the tax plan was received when it was released this week. Reuters headline, fist bumps at hedge funds over Trump's tax plan. New York Times, tax plan silent on carried interest, boon for the very rich. Axios, Trump plan would lower taxes on some hedge fund managers. So, I mean, it looks to me, at least initially here, that the hedge fund guys are still going to be getting away with murder?
Well, that balloon's going to get popped pretty quick. So
it is.
Just stay tuned on that. So, carried interest is on the table, and
this is the loophole that allows hedge fund managers to get a much lower.
The president wants to get rid of carried interest, so that balloon's not going to stay inflated very long. I can assure you of that.
Now this brings me to the question that you've dealt with a lot over the last.
See, we've made news.
Yes, I like that. See, we got some news, but now I want to ask you about the president's own taxes. It was interesting. Secretary Mnuchin, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, speaking of the president's, responding to my question in the briefing room about whether or not he would release his tax returns. So the president has no intention of releasing his taxes. Was he speaking for the president there? Because until then, I had been hearing you all say, and the president saying, that he needed to wait till the audit was done. Is now audit or no audit?
Well, his position is the same, is that he's under routine audit. When an audit's done, he's going to look at releasing his taxes. But wait a minute, let's go back for a second. First of all, this was an issue on the table for the American people. They didn't care. I mean, I hate to tell you, but
polls actually suggested they would like to release this.
The same polls that said he was going to lose and he won. Hang on, you care. Other people apparently that are involved in the news and journalists and people like that.
But I actually don't want to debate
tax release. But the one tax release that was released showed that our president paid $38 million.
Did the president release that?
Someone released it. That he paid $38 million in his taxes. And no, the president didn't release it. Someone obtained it illegally. But he paid $38 million in taxes, and that was supposed to be such a big night for MSNBC.
No, I remember well. I remember he paid a lot of taxes in 2005.
He ended up spent $38 million in taxes. It was about a 25% rate, and everyone said, "Oh, shucks."
But I just want to clarify something.
A ton in taxes.
I just want to clarify the president's position on this. I asked Sean Spicer 2 weeks ago whether or not it was just now. Play it. Let me see what Sean... We always talk about, under audit, the president says under audit. Is it time just to say once and for all, the president is never going to release his tax returns?
We'll have to get back to you on that.
You won't, really?
Really?
So he may?
No, I said I'd have to get back to you on that.
So I just want to clarify, just button this up, and then we never have to ask you again. Is he never going to release his taxes with or without audit, no audit? Is it now the policy that he simply will not release his taxes?
What the president has said is that he's under routine audit. When the audit is over, he will look at releasing his taxes. But again, here's my other point. Nobody cares, Jonathan. You care. No one else cares.
Well, don't the American people have a right to know how this tax plan will affect the president personally?
This issue's been litigated before the American people. And the American people issued a judgment in November. Okay. And President Trump won one of the most historic presidential victories in the history of our country. And the only people asking me this question are people like you.
Okay. So let's. I think that you'll hear some in Congress asking you as well. But let me move on. I want to ask you before you go. The Democrats are saying they would like to see you make this a condition of a tax plan. You need Democratic support.
And the Democrat Party's in the worst shape it's been since 1920.
So I want to move on before you go. We have a segment coming up with Ann Coulter and Robert Reich. Of course, there's a big controversy at Berkeley over freedom of speech. I want to ask you about two things the president has said on related issues. First of all, there was what he said about opening up the libel laws, tweeting, "The failing New York Times has disgraced the media world, gotten me wrong for 2 solid years. Change the libel laws." That would require, as I understand it, a constitutional amendment. Is he really going to pursue that? Is that something he wants to pursue?
I think it's something that we've looked at, and how that gets executed or whether that goes anywhere is a different story. But when you have articles out there that have no basis or fact, and we're sitting here on 24/7 cable companies writing stories about constant contacts with Russia and all these other matters.
So you think the president should be able to sue the New York Times for stories he doesn't like?
I think that newspapers and news agencies need to be more responsible with how they report the news. I am so tired.
I don't think anybody would disagree with that. It's about whether or not the president should have a right to sue them.
And I already answered the question. I said this is something that is being looked at, but it's something that, as far as how it gets executed, where we go with it, that's another issue. But I think this is a frustration of unnamed sources, of things that the FBI has told me personally is complete BS, written in a newspaper article in my office, one-on-one. This here is not true. And guess what? But it's sitting there on the front page. So how is it possible? And what do we have? 24/7 cable about a story about intelligence that the actual intelligence agency says is not true. But yet we deal with it every day.
And then just very quickly, the other thing he talked about is flag burners should either possibly go to jail or have their citizenship.
Our flag people need to stand up for our flag.
Is he going to pursue that?
One thing that we have in common as Americans is our American flag, and I think it's something that, again, is probably going to get looked at. But our flag should be protected, and it's Donald Trump that talks about that issue. And you know what? It's a 70% issue in this country. He wins every day and twice on Sunday on our flag.
Okay, White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, thank you for spending part of your Sunday with us.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you. Up next, on college campuses around the country, there is a debate raging on freedom of speech. We'll talk to the woman at the center of the most recent flare-up at the University of California, Berkeley, conservative firebrand Ann Coulter, as well as Berkeley professor Robert Reich. That's up next.
This week with George Stephanopoulos, brought to you by Dana-Farber Cancer Institute.
We've all been affected by cancer. Some way, somehow. Dana-Farber Cancer Institute is pursuing breakthroughs every day to help end cancer, like identifying genetic mutations for targeted therapies and teaching your immune system to attack cancerous cells by constantly using information in completely new ways. We're cracking the cancer code. Learn more at discovercarebelieve.org.
Life could be a dream. Happiness is powerful flea and tick protection from NexGard, a delicious chew that protects for an entire month. Ask your vet for more information. Reported side effects include vomiting and itching. NexGard, the vet's #1 choice.
Break through your allergies. Try new Flonase Sensimist instead of allergy pills. It delivers a gentle mist to help block 6 key inflammatory substances. Most allergy pills only block 1. New Flonase Sensimist.
We asked people to write down the things they love to do most on these balloons.
Travel with my daughter.
Roller derby?
Now, give up half of them.
Do I have to?
This is the tough financial choice we could face when we retire. But if we start saving even just 1% more of our annual income, we could keep doing all the things we love.
Prudential, bring your challenges.
I'm Joy Bauer, and as a nutritionist, I know probiotics can often help. Try Digestive Advantage. It's tougher than your stomach's harsh environment, so it survives 100 times better than the leading probiotic.
Also in chocolate, Probiotic Bites.
Every night is like something out of a strange dream. Except that the next morning, it all makes sense. FedEx powers global e-commerce with networks built over 40 years that are massive, far-reaching, and yes, maybe a bit magical. Visit FedEx.com/dream.
The University of California, Berkeley, 1964, the birth of the free speech movement. Left-wing student activists asserting their right to free expression, leading to mass arrests and a full year of protests. This year, Berkeley once again is at the center of a national controversy over free expression, this time over the right of conservatives to express their views. And it's the left now being accused of trying to suppress free speech. This month, Berkeley canceled a speech by conservative firebrand Ann Coulter, citing fears her appearance could lead to a violent backlash. Joining me now, Ann Coulter, and Berkeley professor and former Clinton Labor Secretary Robert Reich. Professor Reich, let me start with you. You and Ann Coulter agree on basically nothing. But you said that Berkeley made a, quote, grave mistake by canceling her speech. Why do you believe that?
Jonathan, as you said, I don't remember ever agreeing with Ann Coulter on anything. Maybe there is something Ann and I have agreed on. But I do believe in the First Amendment, and I will fight for her right to say what she wants to say. The First Amendment is, and freedom of speech is, the cornerstone of our democracy. And whether it's college campuses, or it's somebody burning a flag, or it's the newspapers having a right to say whatever they want, we cannot toy around with the First Amendment. It is absolutely critical.
Ann?
Well, thank you, Professor, for allowing me my constitutional rights. But I mean, I must say, I think this debate has, I mean, first of all, has divided leftists in the country from those who believe in the Constitution and those who don't. I think we've seen this thuggish violence at university after university after university. Mario Savio, the one who stood up in the 60s and yelled free speech at Berkeley. Yeah, that was free speech for lefties. But like they say about democracy in the third world, one man, one vote, one time. As soon as the lefties took over the university, that's it. Free speech is shut down. But anyway, I think that hill, when we have Obama, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and Bill Maher, among others, all saying, of course, you should let Ann Coulter speak and not let violent thugs shut it down. Okay, we're done with that hill. Now let's move on to the hill where it's considered, I mean, some of these people, not you, Professor, keep saying, well, of course it's hateful, but hateful speech is allowed to exist. No, I'm sorry, I'm engaging in a public policy debate. That is not a hateful speech. I think those are the lefties we need to to discuss with next. These are important issues of public policy.
But Ann, the reaction of students at a place like Berkeley can't surprise you, given some of the things you have said.
Oh, please.
I mean, well, let's just take a look. You've said that getting rid of women's right to vote is a personal fantasy. You said of one group of 9/11 widows, and I quote, "I've never seen people enjoying their husbands' deaths so much." And then there was the tweet that you put out just the day before the election saying, if only people with at least 4 grandparents born in America were voting, Trump would win in a 50-state landslide. I mean, on that one, by the way, neither Donald Trump or Mike Pence would be able to vote.
Let's just take that one. We can go through all the greatest hits of much of my commentary. I watch roughly 24 hours a day the Hispanic vote, the Hispanic vote, how the browning of America, and how are African Americans voting, how are women voting. I describe one demographic and say how it would come out, and that's hate speech. Why isn't it hate speech to keep telling me how Hispanics are going to vote? What you're talking about are rhetorical flourishes, and I don't know, maybe you guys think you are smarter than the Founding Fathers, but they did not put an asterisk on the First Amendment. Maybe, the Founding Fathers just forgot about that, and no rhetorical flourishes, no jokes.
Well, we finally found something after all these years where I agree with Ann Coulter. That is, there is no hate speech exemption for the First Amendment.
So I want to ask you about the similar controversy that we saw at Middlebury over Charles Murray's attempted speech, which caused violent protests. He ultimately was unable to speak. And then a student at Middlebury explained the situation to the New York Times this way: for too long, a flawed notion of free speech has allowed individuals in position of power to spread racist pseudoscience in academic institutions, dehumanizing and subjugating people of color and gender minorities. So you're a professor at Berkeley. You spend a lot of time with very smart millennials. Are you concerned that there is a growing view among young activists that freedom of speech simply does not apply to offensive speech, that there is that asterisk?
Jonathan, to the extent that there is that view at Berkeley or any place else, I am concerned, because one of the purposes of a university education is to be provoked, to examine what the evidence is. And if somebody says something that is offensive, well, that is not per se a violation of any kind of university norm. In fact, quite the opposite. I tell my students all the time the best way to learn something is to talk to people who disagree with you, because that forces you to sharpen your views and test your views, and you might even come out in a different place. A university of all places is the locus where we want to have provocative views. We want to have views that some people find to be offensive.
Hey, Ann, can we find another place where the two of you might agree? I want to ask you, and I talked to Reince Priebus about it here just a short while ago, about what the president has said about opening up the libel laws. And we heard Priebus say that this is something they are still looking into. In other words, giving the president the ability to sue the New York Times or other news organizations for coverage that he does not like. Can we agree that that is not a good idea?
I can answer that very quickly. No, I've always thought there should be a pure truth-falsity standard and a limit on damages, but I do want to agree with the professor on universities ought to be places where I am not the only conservative most students will hear in 4 years of college. And what this shows, this whole incident shows, again, it shows this radical, insulated left on the college campuses, and the entire left wing, including President Obama and Bill Maher on the other side, and what useless institutions our universities are. The prices have gone up 3,000% since the 70s. Is the education better? No, it's worse. The lefties are on the side of the thugs. They've taken over the universities. I don't think anyone learns anything at college anymore. It's a 4-year vacation, and I think that's what people ought to be looking at, because the taxpayers are supporting these universities, not just University of California, but with federal grants, every university in America.
If I can just get to your question, Jonathan, the libel laws should not be widened. I mean, we really do need a free press. One thing that concerns me about the present administration is the willingness of the administration to not only talk about widening the libel laws and also criminalize flag burning, but even the President of the United States last night using an opportunity in Harrisburg to summon his supporters and to criticize the press once again. This is dangerous. I mean, if we believe in the First Amendment, we believe in a free and independent press.
All right, Professor Robert Reich, Ann Coulter, a debate that you couldn't have seen at Berkeley. Thank you for joining us on This Week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The First Amendment was celebrated last night at the annual White House Correspondents' Dinner. Coming up, the president of the White House Correspondents Association, Jeff Mason of Reuters, joins our roundtable. But first, an exclusive interview with House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi. We'll ask her why 2/3 of Americans feel the Democratic Party is out of touch. That's coming up next.
Depression is a tangle of multiple symptoms. That's why there's Trintellix, a prescription medication for depression. Trintellix may help you take a step forward in improving your depression. Tell your healthcare professional right away if your depression worsens or you have unusual changes in mood, behavior, or thoughts of suicide. Antidepressants can increase these in children, teens, and young adults. Do not take with MAOIs. Tell your healthcare professional about your medications, including migraine, psychiatric, and depression medications, to avoid a potentially life-threatening condition. Increased risk of bleeding or bruising may occur, especially if taken with NSAID pain relievers, aspirin, or blood thinners. Manic episodes or vision problems may occur in some people. May cause low sodium levels. The most common side effects were nausea, constipation, and vomiting. Trintellix had no significant impact on weight in clinical trials. Ask your healthcare professional about Trintellix.
So you miss the big city?
I don't miss much. Definitely not the traffic.
Excuse me, doctor. The genomic data came in.
Thank you.
You can do that kind of analysis.
Yeah, Watson.
I can quickly analyze millions of clinical and scientific reports to help you tailor treatment options for the patient's genomic profile.
You can do that, even way out here.
Yes, even way out here.
I'm Joy Bauer, and as a nutritionist, I know probiotics can often help. Try Digestive Advantage. It's tougher than your stomach's harsh environment, so it survives 100 times better than the leading probiotic.
Also in chocolate probiotic bites.
Say, Carl, we have a question about your brokerage fees.
Please.
What do you have in mind? I don't know. $4.95 per trade?
And I was wondering if your brokerage offers some sort of guarantee.
Guarantee.
Where we can get our fees and commissions back if we're not happy.
So can you offer me what Schwab is offering?
What's with all the questions?
Ask your broker if they're offering $4.95 online equity trades and a satisfaction guarantee. If you don't like their answer, ask again at Schwab.
Kiefer Sutherland is the designated survivor. Wednesday, 10/9 Central on ABC.
Several months into training for a marathon, Aubrey Ness suffered a stroke. She was taken by helicopter to the University of Chicago Medicine. 3 weeks later, she went home. 4 months later, Aubrey did what she'd originally set out to do: run 26.2 miles and finish the marathon. Thanks in part to the critical care she received at one of Chicago's longest-running hospitals.
The ABC 7 AccuWeather team only on Eyewitness News.
This event is about celebrating the First Amendment and free speech. Free speech is the foundation of an open and liberal democracy. From college campuses to the White House, only in America can a first-generation Indian American Muslim kid get on this stage and make fun of the president. And it's a sign to the rest of the world. It's this amazing tradition that shows the entire world that even the president is not beyond the reach of the First Amendment.
That was comedian Hassan Minhaj at last night's White House Correspondents' Dinner. Legendary White House journalist, Watergate journalists Woodward and Bernstein also spoke, encouraging reporters to, quote, follow the money and follow the lies. More on that later with our roundtable, but first, we'll be right back with Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi.
This week with George Stephanopoulos, brought to you by AT&T Business.
Ray's always been different. Last year, he said he was going to dig a hole to China.
AT&T is working with farmers to improve irrigation techniques. Remote moisture sensors use a reliable network to tell them when and where to water, so that farmers like Ray can compete in big ways.
China. Oh, he got there.
That's the power of and.
Your brain changes as you get older, but Prevagen helps your brain with an ingredient originally discovered in jellyfish. In clinical trials, Prevagen has been shown to improve short-term memory. Prevagen, the name to remember.
Whether you're after supreme performance, advanced intelligence, or breathtaking style, there's a C-Class just for you. Decisions, decisions, decisions. Lease the C300 sedan for $389 a month at your local Mercedes-Benz dealer. Mercedes-Benz, the best or nothing.
Hi, I'm Frank. I take Movantik for OIC, opioid-induced constipation. I had a bad back injury. My doctor prescribed opioids, which helped with the chronic pain, but backed me up. Big time. Tried prunes, laxatives, still constipated. Had to talk to my doctor. She said, "How long you been holding this in?" That was my Movantik moment. My doctor told me that Movantik is specifically designed for OIC and can help you go more often. Don't take Movantik if you have a bowel blockage or a history of them. Movantik may cause serious side effects, including symptoms of opioid withdrawal, severe stomach pain and or diarrhea, and tears in the stomach or intestine. Tell your doctor about any side effects and about medicines you take. Movantik may interact with them, causing side effects. Why hold it in? Have your Movantik moment. Talk to your doctor about opioid-induced constipation. If you can't afford your medication, AstraZeneca may be able to help.
Life could be a dream. Happiness is powerful flea and tick protection from NexGard, a delicious chew that protects for an entire month. Ask your vet for more information. Reported side effects include vomiting and itching. NexGard, the vet's #1 choice.
Allergy sufferers, this is new Zysol, the wise new choice for allergy relief. If symptoms like these keep you from a good night's sleep and ruin your next day, try new Zysol. It relieves symptoms while you sleep and keeps relieving all day because it's as effective at hour 24 as it is at hour 1. It's original prescription strength with no prescription needed. So, for continuous allergy relief, be wise all. Take new Zysol.
Merge? With who?
A behavioral health practice.
But do you know how involved a merger will be? We do. Which is why we're bringing in BDO.
People who know BDO.
Traffic is backed up. There's an accident on the freeway that hasn't been cleared yet. Not too bad.
When heartburn hits, fight back fast with Tums Smoothies. It starts dissolving the instant it touches your tongue and neutralizes stomach acid at the source. Smoothies, only from Tums.
The grades are coming due for President Trump after a historically dismal first 100 days. Budget, F. Creating jobs, F. Draining the swamp, F. Healthcare, F-.
And there's House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi giving her grade of President Trump's first 100 days in office. She joins us now in the studio. Leader Pelosi, thank you for being here this week.
Thank you.
So we heard you give President Trump an F-. What's your grade for Democrats during the first 100 days of the Trump era?
Oh my gosh, in terms of unity, 100% unified. That's how we were able to work with an outside mobilization, channeling the energy of the American people to defeat their drastic, horrible health care bill.
But if you look at our latest ABC News Washington Post poll, 2/3 of the American people say the Democratic Party is out of touch. That is more than say President Trump is out of touch, more than say Republicans are out of touch. Isn't the Democratic Party a bit of a mess right now, too?
No, it isn't. The Democratic Party is unified. I would say my own critique of the Democrats, we have walked the walk. but we haven't talked the talk. All we do is fight for America's working families against special interests that the Republicans represent, but that has not come across.
So you've said you think that Democrats can win back the House.
Yes.
Let's do the odds. What is the percentage chance that you are re-elected Speaker of the House?
Well, it's not about me. It's about
the Democrats. The Democrats
can retake. It's about the Democrats. Better and better. History is on our side. As you recall, when Clinton was president, the Republicans won. When Bush was president, the Democrats won. When Obama was president, the Republicans won. It's nothing to be taken for granted. But we feel that, again, history on our side. I've never, in my years in politics, seen so much enthusiasm.
Let's imagine for a minute that you actually win. Democrats retake the House. How does a Democratic House, you as a Democratic Speaker, work with this president? I mean, you've been the resistance. You look a lot like a party of no right now. You're blocking.
I don't think that at all.
Opposing when he's in. How do you work with him?
What is he proposing? A bill that had 17% support in the public in his health care bill? He hasn't really proposed anything. We're looking for the infrastructure bill, which we're welcome to. We welcome and want to work with the president on. We welcome some of his ideas, as you said in the campaign, about work and home balance in terms of child care, etc., affordable child care. We look forward to working with him. We said we would work on a tax reform for fairness and transparency and what did he put out? But a wish list for billionaires. I see everything as an opportunity, and I've never seen so much willingness to help win. And winning means winning for the American people, that either we win or whoever wins understands the priorities of the American people, and they are not with President Bush. Excuse me. I'm so sorry, President Bush. I never thought I'd pray for the day that you were president again, but...
You're praying for the day that President Bush is president again?
Well, we worked, and so you asked the question, how would I work with a Republican president? The way we worked with President Bush. We got a great deal accomplished. We opposed him on the war in Iraq vociferously. We opposed him on his privatization of Social Security, but we worked with him on many other issues. The biggest energy bill in the history of our country, a tax bill that helped low-income working families, PEPFAR, that he wanted and we want it to be big, and we found our common ground. The list goes on and on.
Well, let me put one hypothetical out there. You clearly have opposed and will oppose funding for the wall. Democrats.
Oh, yeah.
No question. Yeah. But is there a possibility for a grand bargain on immigration where Democrats agree to support money for the president's wall, to support money for additional border security, more ICE agents, and the president agrees to support a path to legal status? Is there a possibility for the two sides, even on an issue like immigration, to come together? Money for the wall, but also a path to citizenship?
No.
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 So you wouldn't even...
No, well, we already had a bipartisan bill out of the United States Senate.
It failed. It's gone. It's gone.
No, it didn't fail. The House Republicans failed to bring it up. Okay, it would have won if they had brought it up, but it did not become law.
Did not become law.
So there is a path. We don't have to pay for us to do the right thing as a country, and overwhelmingly the American people support a path to citizenship for the people who are in our country. We have to protect our borders. That's our responsibility as a nation, north and south.
So why not then agree to offer border security, a wall, which was his central campaign promise?
No. He never said. Did you ever hear him say, I'm going to charge the American people?
No, he wasn't actually going to pay for it.
Tens of billions of dollars. Opportunity cost for the education of our children, of infrastructure throughout our country, investments in biomedical research, which he is cutting now, so that we can have this immoral, ineffective, expensive, unwise wall. No.
President Obama came back out on the public stage again, but we also saw he accepted $400,000 for a speech at a Wall Street conference. Are you uneasy with the idea of President Obama taking $400,000 from Wall Street for a speech?
Here's the thing. President Obama led the way on Dodd-Frank, which did more to curb the influence and the greed, beyond greed, almost some of it criminal, in terms of what they were doing on Wall Street. He has standing to go any place and say,
and accept
I've
whatever
done,
honorary.
I have done. I'm not big on. I don't know about these honorary and the rest of it. I don't speak to who gets what for what. What's important is what we do that affects the lives of the American people. President Obama is no longer president.
Okay, so let's get to the tax.
President Trump is, and he has surrounded himself with a cabinet of Wall Streeters. After he said in the campaign, I'm going to fire Wall Street. Fire Wall Street and then rehire them in my cabinet. So let's talk about what matters to the American people in terms of policy, if you want to talk about Wall Street.
How often do you talk to the president?
I have no complaint that I don't talk to him enough.
So you hear from him with regularity?
No, I wouldn't say. Well, I talk to him enough. I mean, I've spoken to him, and I've spoken to his administration about issues, and we have a courteous, really cordial, respectful conversation. But I always grant people their position. I respect what you believe in and what you have come to do. I'm not absolutely sure what he believes in yet, but if it's reflected in his budget, we will fight that. But he knows that. And so I think we have shall we say, an understanding.
Leader Nancy Pelosi, thank you very much for joining us here this week. We'll be right back with the roundtable and a look at President Trump's next 100 days in office.
Summer of 1997.
She wanted to rock the establishment, to rock Prince Charles.
She knew exactly what she was doing.
She just said, you'll be surprised what I do next.
100 days! Suddenly, after all this time, she found passion.
There was a great sexual attraction. It was a disaster waiting to happen.
Princess called you on the day she died.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
The last 100 days of Diana. Next Sunday at 9/8 Central on ABC.
We gotta address the elephant that's not in the room. The leader of our country is not here. And that's because he lives in Moscow. It is a very long flight. It'd be hard for Vlad to make it. Vlad can't just make it on a Saturday. It's a Saturday. As for the other guy, I think he's in Pennsylvania because he can't take a joke.
Comedian Hassan Minhaj at last night's White House Correspondents' Dinner. Our Powerhouse Roundtable joins me now. Daily Caller White House correspondent Caitlin Collins. Reuters White House correspondent Jeff Mason. Also, the president of the White House Correspondents Association. And 538 senior political editor Perry Bacon Jr. So let me start with you, Jeff. President became the first president since 1981 not to go to the dinner, and that was Ronald Reagan. He had just been shot, so he had an excuse. But you just interviewed. You had a big interview with the president. Did you get the sense, talking to him, that he regrets this decision in any way?
I didn't get the sense that he regretted the decision. I certainly got the sense that he was still thinking about it and thinking about the issue. He talked about potentially coming the following year. He was following it closely, was interested in it, but he didn't say anything about regretting his decision not to come.
Because this was an extraordinary move, not simply that he decided not to come, but the fact that there was essentially a boycott by the entire White House, none of the White House staff.
Yeah, it was unprecedented that the rest of the White House staff was, I think, essentially not allowed to come. They were said that they did that in solidarity with the president, but I know that there are plenty of White House staff and others in the administration who would have liked to have attended that dinner.
So, Caitlin, what was the message that he was trying to send with this? The White House was trying to send with
Well, it's a little artificial because he said he didn't want to come. They said there would be natural tension there, and it was naive of them to think that they could come and enjoy that dinner and not be hypocritical. But he lambasted, the press, and last week he was interviewing the president. So he's obviously cozy with him.
A lot of interviews
in
last
private,
week.
Exactly. He's like such a media-friendly president, and he sat down with him and had an interview with him, but then he refused to go to the dinner that he hosted. So it seems a little artificial to me that he didn't go because he didn't want to seem too cozy with the press. He's very cozy with the press.
I would disagree with the use of the word cozy. I do think that they have a sort of a dichotomy and an irony in how they deal with the press, particularly the president. He is accessible, and I talked about that last night at the dinner. Yeah. The Trump White House has been very accessible to the press, and that is something that the Correspondents Association wants and pushes for.
Right,
but then you've got this other rhetoric about how the press is the
opposition
enemy of the
party,
people,
enemy of the people.
Exactly. He regularly criticizes the New York Times, the Washington Post, and when his health care bill didn't have enough votes and they pulled it, those were the first two publications he called. So how can you criticize them on Twitter to where your supporters think that they're not trustworthy and they're dishonest, but then those are the reporters you trust the most to call and tell them what really happened?
And look, Perry, I've been covering on and off Donald Trump for like a couple of decades. I mean, since I was a reporter for the New York Post in another era. He's always been a very, accessible and media-friendly. I mean, he criticized, lash out, but essentially a media-friendly figure. That's been a key to his success. But you heard from Reince Priebus saying that they're serious about this idea, or they're looking into this idea still, of changing the libel laws.
That was a strange thing he said, to be honest with you. I was very surprised by that. You asked him about the libel laws, and he basically said we're looking into it. I wasn't convinced he actually is looking into it, but I took it more that they're not going to walk that back. Like, Donald Trump tends not to apologize. It seems like his staff is following that idea as well. And I did think last night fit into the campaign in the sense that I'm going to drain the swamps. I'm not going to party with the swamp. I think that made sense to some extent. I'm going to be out there with my people, not with the reporters in tuxedos. So I thought that fit with his message of from the beginning. He's been a president who's going to have a different relationship with Washington than previous ones have.
So what was the president? You guys had a chance. I mean, you were out late at the course. I mean, thank you very much for being here and looking so rested.
Pleasure.
But what was the president's main message last night? That sounded a little bit like a throwback speech to me.
Oh, definitely. It was like we were all in the campaign all over again. But I would like to touch on Reince's statement about the libel laws. Yeah. It's misinformed. They can't do that. There is no federal statute about libel laws. That's a state thing, so they can't change that.
You would need a constitutional amendment,
right? Which is incredibly unlikely to happen. So that I don't even know why he said that. That's misinformed.
But last night this was hard edge. This was America First. This was vintage campaign Donald Trump.
Exactly.
I think that's right. I think he wanted to go in that direction. I think it was a contrast he wanted. He listed, and he also wanted to say, I've done some of the things that I said I would do. And if you look at his immigration policy, for example, I think he has. The number of border crossings have went way down in the last few months, and that is something he talked about a lot, is I want people not to come here illegally anymore. And he wanted to sort of list out what has he done and how has he met his promises, because the media has suggested he's failed in a lot of ways, and there have been obviously some major setbacks on health care, the travel ban. I think he wanted the message last night was, here are the things that I'm doing, here are the check marks I'm hitting. Ignore the media saying my 100 days we're not very good.
I was struck by Nancy Pelosi being point blank saying not open to a compromise on immigration. Maybe that's not surprising given how deeply divided everybody is, but the idea of the president getting money for his wall that he'll get back later from Mexico in exchange for a path to citizenship even. My sense, and Caitlin, tell me what you think, but my sense is that within this White House, there are obviously different views on immigration, but there is, I think, a sense that a compromise like that is something that the president would be open to. Maybe not citizenship, but comprehensive immigration reform in exchange for
He's definitely open
security.
to it. And he relented the other night and said he might not get funding for the border wall until September. He didn't get it in, the CR that they passed. But I do think he has softened his stance on immigration a lot. As a candidate, he promised to get rid of DACA and the H-1B visa program because he said they were illegal and that Barack Obama defied federal law when he signed those. And he softened his stance on both of those. He said that Dreamers can rest easy on his immigration policies, that he's not going to come after them. And I'm interested to see how the president's supporters will react to that when they see that he's not cracking down on it like he said he would.
So you already see it. DACA is in place.
Right.
This was something that he, talked about doing away with on day one. It is still in place.
Exactly.
Is he getting blowback from the right on this?
I don't think he's getting enough. I've asked him about it repeatedly. And when he had the reception for conservative media last week, I was there. And a lot of people were asking him some really easy questions that you could tell he wanted to answer. But I raised my hand and I said, do you still think DACA is illegal? Because I don't care about DACA, but his supporters care about it. That's why a lot of people voted for him. And he said his usual answer, which is that he has heart and he's not going to deport children who came to the country with their parents. And he really didn't take the stance that he said at multiple rallies where he said he's going to get rid of it and they're not going to live here anymore.
And Jeff, you got to say that flexibility has been one of the defining characteristics of the Trump presidency.
Absolutely. His ability and openness to shifting positions on very firm positions that he had as a candidate has been remarkable. And I think it's interesting to see how his supporters react. He seems to be unique both then as a candidate and now as a president to be able to change his opinion without necessarily getting blowback from the people who put him in office.
So far, the polling tells us no one has changed their mind about Donald Trump.
Bingo.
His base is very much with him.
Bingo.
The people who hated him on January 21st they still hate him. So that nothing's on the immigration issue. I would say the way they've enforced policy on where they're trying to deport people at courthouses, for example. The Latino community is very concerned that some on the right say he's not been aggressive enough. Some on the left say he's been too aggressive. So he's in a place in immigration where the policies are very complicated, and he's moved on some issues, he's not on others. It's kind of hard to figure out where he stands and where he's going to go in terms of immigration policy in the next 100 days.
Okay, so before you guys go, I got to ask you about the other big. We had the tax plan released, or at least the outline of the tax plan.
19 bullets.
Yeah, 19. I didn't even count. So where does this go? Do they have a chance of seeing something by the end of the year pass that incorporates most of those 19 bullet points?
I think that's his dream. He wants to emulate Ronald Reagan and have something significant pass in the first year of his first term.
I need a tax cut bigger than Reagan's.
Right, exactly. The most significant in history. But it's funny how it's the biggest one, but it only took them 20 minutes to brief reporters on the outline of it. They didn't really answer a lot of questions. There were no specifics in this bill, so I definitely do not think we will see this by the end of the year.
I also think you have to see how will Republicans accept an increase in deficits, and why would Democrats get supportive or get behind something like this?
Let me play something very quickly. Nancy Pelosi, I asked her about the corporate tax rate and if she'd be open to a compromise. Listen to this.
I think we could probably split the difference between the 35 and the 15. We've always been for lowering the corporate rate.
So you could agree to a 22 or 3% corporate tax
Somewhere
rate?
there.
So you think there could be a deal on taxes?
Oh, absolutely.
What do you think?
I'm less optimistic than Nancy Pelosi. I think the gap between a lot of the proposals so far, the details suggest there's going to be a large decrease in taxes on the wealthy. And I would be very surprised Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and other Democrats feel like this is not just a corporate tax. There's a lot of other elements here that I think will be more controversial on the Democratic side. But they probably can pass it without any Democratic votes if they use reconciliation. So it could still happen as well.
Although Reince Priebus made some news with us saying that he's going to close
this was interesting.
Hedge fund loophole. All right, that's all the time we have. We'll be right back after this from our ABC stations.
Jazz pianist Billy Foster had to face the music. Cancer had spread to his lungs, liver, and brain. With time running out, he participated in a leading-edge clinical trial, and his cancer hasn't been a problem since. As for his ability to swing, well, that's never been a problem.
Before we go, I want to address a comment from the president this week that touched off an avalanche of criticism and mockery. In an interview with Reuters, President Trump said of his job, "I thought it would be easier." Commentators, journalists, and the president's political foes pounced on those words. How could he have thought it would be easier? Now, it's true that as a candidate, Donald Trump said over and over again that it would be easy to fix America's problems. But before you mock those words of President Trump, consider the words of John F. Kennedy when Dwight D. Eisenhower visited him at Camp David about 100 days into Kennedy's presidency. It's a story recounted by historian Stephen Ambrose and a story Nancy Pelosi brought up to me at the end of our interview. Kennedy told Eisenhower, "No one knows how tough this job is until he's been in it for a few months." "Mr. President," Eisenhower answered, "if you will forgive me, I think I mentioned that to you 3 months ago." Kennedy responded, "I certainly have learned a lot since then." If President Trump has learned the same lesson, that may just be a 100-day accomplishment worth celebrating. That's all for today. Thank you for sharing part of your Sunday with us. Check out World News tonight. And until next week, that's this week.
This week, the 100-day mark now passed. So what's next? With tensions rising in North Korea
and Afghanistan, and so much from taxes to your family's health care still on the table. Where things stand in Washington. This is Where America Turns. World News Tonight with David Muir.
One day, I found a lump on my right breast. In a small town, we don't have a health center on every corner. It would take 3 to 4 weeks to be seen. So I called Planned Parenthood, and they got me in that day.
Extreme politicians are trying to defund Planned Parenthood, which would have a devastating impact on the more than 60,000 people who rely on Planned Parenthood in Illinois.
Had I have waited a day, I would have had stage 4 cancer. Planned Parenthood saved my life.
Call Congressman Roscoe and ask him to protect women's health.
At Angelo Caputo Fresh Markets, you'll find the quality and commitment to each of our local communities that has made Angelo Caputo Fresh Markets part of the Chicagoland area since my grandparents, Angelo and Romana Caputo, started the company in 1958. For 3 generations, we've strived to provide your family with the freshest foods, unique offerings, and so much more. All at a value second to none. Stop in any of our 8 locations and experience the Angelo Caputo's family difference. Angelo Caputo's Fresh Markets, keeping the traditions alive from our family to yours since 1958.
Hi, I'm Joel Osteen with my friends John and Sue Ellison. They pastor Lakewood Chapel. I hope you'll stop by when you get a chance. I know you'll be blessed, encouraged. They'll help you become all God's created you to be.
Thank you, Pastor Joel. You and Lakewood Church have been such a blessing to our congregation, and we're excited and honored to be part of this ministry.
We'd like you to be a part also, so come visit us Sunday. You'll be glad that you did.
And we'll make you feel right at home.
Meteorologist Bill Schwartz, only on ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
Well, God bless you. It's a joy to come into your homes. If you're ever in our area, please stop by and be a part of one of our services. I promise you, we'll make you feel right at home. I like to start with something funny, and I heard about this lady that died, and she was at the pearly gates, and St. Peter said, you can't come in yet. You have to correctly spell a word. She said, what word? He said, any word. So she spelled the word love, L-O-V-E. He said, welcome to heaven. Then Peter asked her if she would take his place for just a moment. He instructed her if anybody came up just to follow the same procedure. A few minutes, she sees her ex-husband walking up. She can't believe it. Says, what are you doing here? He said, I just had a heart attack. Did I really make it to heaven? She said, not yet. You have to spell a word correctly. He said, what word? There was a long pause, and she said, Czechoslovakia. I want to talk to you today about emptying out the negative. It's easy to go through life holding on to things that are weighing us down. Guilt, resentment, doubt, worry. The problem is when we allow these things in, they're taking up space for the good things that should be there. Imagine your life is like a container. You were created to be filled with joy, peace, confidence, creativity. But if you allow worry in, it pushes out the peace. There's not space for both. You can't go above 100%. You have a limited amount of room. If you allow guilt to take up space, that's space that you don't have for the confidence you need. And the reason some people don't enjoy their lives is because their container, their heart is contaminated with so many things. They have 10% worried, stressed out over their job, 12% bitterness, mad at their neighbor, 20% guilt, beating themselves up for past mistakes, 9% jealousy, their coworker is more beautiful. They don't